Ablat Gemara. We are up to the Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph, and we have less than a month to go to finish the Masechta. We are up to the two dots. We're learning about the activities of an bar mitzvah underage boy, and the Mishnah finishes off that cotton doesn't only mean underage; it can even be 20 years old. Says the Gemara, about 10 lines from the top of the page. Echad ben tes shanim, echad ben esrim. But we ask a question. It says clearly ben esrim shana. A 20-year-old, if he didn't reach puberty, who ben esim, he has to bring a raya that he is 20 years old, v'hu hasaris, and he is considered a saris, which we learned before. Saris, somebody is sterile, goes to a certain age, but 20 years old and didn't reach puberty, he becomes an adult. Our Mishnah calls a 20-year-old a child. It says clearly that 20 years old and you didn't reach puberty, you're an adult. But of course, he is not involved in Yibum because he can maintain the legacy of his brother. And the same thing by a girl, Bas Esim Shana, if she reaches 20 years old, didn't reach puberty. Brings a proof that she's 20 years old. He islandless, and that's what we call an islandless, which comes from the word ayol ram, male ram. So why is the Mishnah called him a child? Says the Gemara, a minor. Says the Gemara, Allah. Didn't we learn previously? Who a 20 years old, and you have to have telltale signs. Remember, we had before the signs of a saris. We had an argument whether you need all the signs, that say, a feminine voice and all that, and the way his urine goes, all the signs, or just even one of the signs. But the point is, when is a 20 years old considered an adult? If they don't have puberty, only if he has the signs of a saris. Our Mishnah is talking about a 20-year-old, but no signs. And no signs if he's still a minor. Amar Rav approved to. They cannot meet, says right here in this place, says here, the Tony will who has saris, and he happens to be a saris. In other words, there's signs. Shmamina says the Gemara no little simon saris. What about someone who did not reach puberty but doesn't have the vital signs of a saris? So when are you considered a minor? A kama. Till you reach the age of 35 and a bit. He also comes to Rabba when they used to come before Rabba to test to see whether they're considered sterile or not. So eat kochash if they were anorexic. Amelie would say, "Zilavri, go eat something and let's see then," because it seemed that anorexia or extremely thin causes also that they should not have reached puberty. The body if they're extremely obese. Amelie would tell them, "Zilachru, go on a diet." Because the hani simonin, sometimes these signs, in the nasi the signs of being a saris, sometimes do not appear if depending on your physiological build. Some may fall because you're too skinny, some may fall out because you're too heavy. So therefore, let's see what happens when you reach your normal weight, and then we can determine who you are. Says the Gemara.
Can I just ask? You said that the Rov Shnosov means 70 years. 35. Is that because it says?
All
right.
That's right. Okay. Anyway, so he would tell them that sometimes the reason why you didn't reach puberty, you don't have the signs of puberty, is because of your weight. Interesting. But we're up to now the next page. We learned before already. If let's say your father goes ahead, well, let's say if you rape somebody, you seduce somebody. Normally, if you marry a woman, you're not allowed to have anything to do with her children, your stepdaughter, your step-granddaughter. But if you rape somebody, then her children are not forbidden to you. So you're allowed to marry her, her immediate relatives. And her oin is mafata al sulchay. But let's say if you're married to a woman and you then rape or seduce her daughter, even though it's not marriage, that is forbidden. You're not allowed to marry your father's ex-wife, but you're allowed to marry your father's ex-victims. And your father's allowed to marry the victims of his son. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees when it comes to your father. Rabbi Yehuda, he says that you come to your father's victims, even though they weren't his legal wife, still forbidden for you, as we have a passing we already had before. We learned, Anis, Isha, Mutter, Lisa, Bita. If you, let's say, force yourself on a woman, you're allowed to marry your daughter, Nasa, Isha. But if you married a woman, also Lisa, Bita, you're not allowed to marry your daughter. But I mean, let's ask a question. So our Mishnah says clearly, lechatchila, noisi means lechatchila. Lechatchila, you can go ahead and marry the daughter, let's say, of your victim. It says clearly, we learned Hanita, and if let's say there is a rumor, we had this whole sugi before. Hanita mini isha, there's a rumor abounding that you had either you seduced or you raped this woman. Also, it's forbidden. You're not allowed to have anything to do with the daughter. So how can I Mishnah say you're allowed to? Says the Gemara midrabanan. This particular Bryce is telling midrabanan. Ma'atayri, you're allowed to. Let's say you seduce a woman, you're allowed to marry her daughter, but midrabanan you're not allowed to. Says the Gemara, if midrabanan you're not allowed to, how can I Mishnah say lechatchila you can? I Mishnah noisi lechatchila you can go ahead and marry. How? When it's midrabanan it's awesome. Says the Gemara, kitra masnisin la'achamisa. While that victim is still alive, you're not allowed to marry a daughter midrabanan. The victim passed away, or the one you sued passed away, then the chatchila, even the rabban, you're allowed to marry your daughter. And you're allowed to. Says the Gemara, how do you know there's a Torah about we learned? Bikulan nemar shchiva, bekan nemar kicha. By all the arayas, it says shchiva, you're not allowed to, not have relations with her. But over here, when it talks about anusa, it says kicha. It says kicha. You're not allowed to take. I'll tell you, derech kicha, derech was it? Lekuchin osra toida. When is it forbidden? Only if you took her in the normal way of lekuchin. But if you didn't take a lekuchin, in other words, it wasn't through marriage. It was only through anusa. There's no problem whatsoever. There's no problem. All right, it says about imo bita there. It says the word leisikach. Now, when's it usher? Only if you married her. Following the logic, whenever it says likach, it means only through marriage. So when it comes to the issue of incest, it says ish asher yikach es achois. Also the word yikach. The person takes his sister bas of the basim, the daughter of his father's mother. Hachinami, according to you, it should only be usher incest. That kichudas only if you do for marriage. That is shiva shadi, but it's time to have relations is permitted. Following your logic. Amalei, he says to him, no. Sabai said to the Papa, Lekuchin ksiva b'teira stam. The Torah says the word lekuchin. Lekuchin is a very powerful word. Haro lekicha kicha, if it could be talking about marriage, for example, a woman and her daughter, they could be talking about marriage. So it's telling you, when is it also to live with her daughter? Only if you married her mother. Because it's lekuchin there. But haro l'shchiva, but by a sister, it can't be marriage. So therefore, you can't marry a sister. So therefore, it must be talking about even just having a relations. Rava says, on this Isha, I hold you say that the whole mockery is from the word, because it says kicha, which means by a mother and a daughter only if it's through marriage. But if it's, let's say if she was your victim, the mother, you're allowed to marry a daughter. I have another source for it. Rava on this Isha, if you enforce yourself on a woman, you're allowed to marry a daughter. I have another basis for it altogether, and that is what do you call it? Mahachim here, it says, the erva of the daughter of your son, the daughter of your daughter. You shouldn't reveal mashma habas benodida, but the daughter of, let's say, of your wife's son. No, not your son. Ubas bita, the daughter of your wife's daughter. Gala, you could reveal. Uksi Barosa says, ervas isha bita loisegala. Then another pasuk says, but the erva of a woman and her daughter knows not even if it's not your daughter, but her daughter, loisegala, as bas bavila sikach. No, it's a state of the tupsukim. Okay, so how do you reconcile this tupsukim? So I'll tell you how. Kan ba'ointi kan benasun. If you marry her, then her daughter is forbidden. If it's only through forcing yourself upon her, the daughter permitted. Says the Gemara, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe your own daughter, maybe your own daughter, maybe your married wife's daughter, you're allowed to. And if you force yourself, you're not allowed to. And Teresa asks, what possible logic could even be in that? And the logic is that maybe he did a sin. Because he did a sin with the mother, he should also be forbidden for the daughter. In the case when you marry the mother, where it's legal, maybe the daughter is permitted. Her daughter is permitted. So my answer is, Aroyish exibu. Aroyish says over time relative. And it's only a relative if you marry the mother. But by Ointin, there is no relations. Says Rabbi says it's forbidden if you force it on somebody. It's forbidden. My time, Rabbi, what's the logic of Rabbi Yehuda? Why does he say that even if you force yourself, it's forbidden? Because it says in the passage, you should not take your father's wife. Then there's like another law, but do not reveal the intimate part of your father. or the inner parts with your father. A woman that had relations with your father, don't reveal. So therefore, we're going to say that's about somebody else. Who's that? Someone that your father didn't marry, but rather a victim. How do we know that it's talking about anusa? It says in the pasuk before that the krav if somebody seduced a woman and so on and so forth, that girl, he has to pay a penalty. So we're talking about a woman that is not your wife, and then the following psukim it talks about. What do you call it? It says that you should not take the H's of your father. The following pasuk says, "Do not take your father's wife," and do not reveal it. So therefore, obviously, the Yigala is a continuation of the previous parsha, talking about a woman that you seduced or you forced yourself on. But Rabbanan is a very good point. Rabbi Yehuda smuchin, and Rabbi Yehuda said even though there's no smuchin, the rest of the Torah and Chumash Dvarim there is. So of course, Rabbanan should agree with that. Rabbanan, if it was mamish next to each other, you're right. In between the previous parsha and the words le'igala knaf aviv, it says le'ikach ish es eshes aviv. It brings in another part. You shouldn't take the wife of your father. So therefore, it's not smuchin anymore. That smuchin means mamish in proximity to each other, not that there's anything else in between. And so what does he do with this pasuk? What does it mean le'igala knaf aviv then? The boy the Rabbanan for Rabbanan, we're talking about a woman who is your father's sister-in-law, and your father's brother passed away childless, and now your father has to marry a sister-in-law, and she's not allowed to marry a stranger, so you're not allowed to marry, and the son is not allowed to marry either. Somebody that's suitable for your father, your father's sister-in-law, your uncle's wife. What is your uncle's wife? Forget the reason why you're not allowed to, not because it's your father's sister-in-law, is because it's your uncle's wife. But it's your uncle's wife, and that's forbidden in the Torah as well. So you want to answer, you're right. In this instance, you're over two Avedas. So there's a third problem. Forget about being a relative. A woman who's waiting to marry a brother who's not going to marry any stranger, any foreigner, and there's a lav there. So what do I need to add? That your father is, sister-in-law and waiting. To tell you you're over three Avedas. So another answer is let's say your father died. After your father died, there's no longer the Isser of Yevamos L'Shuk, because there's no Yevamah anymore. The father died. Still forbidden to you, because this was a kana for Rol Aviv, even though today it isn't. And therefore you get two lavim. You get the lav of an ant and the lav of Rol Aviv. Now the next Gemara is very puzzling, and it's a set of riddles. And Rashi says, the top Rashi, Mishal is saying these are riddles or gilim bin adam la'ayva. People used to say it. So why the Gemara would spend time telling these riddles, familiar riddles, not clear. But Taisa says, and I'm not sure exactly what it means. The top Taisa on the page says, Elu hamasim le mashmin lachmidi. These stories don't teach you anything. Ela l'tshuvas hatzdukim, to answer the tzdukim. Where does tzdukim come into it? It's nothing to do with the Torah or anything else. It's as if Taisa seems to be saying that every time we had a problem debate, they used to throw in all these red herrings. They used to taunt the Rabbanim. They used to make fun of them and show that they're smarter than them and ask them these riddles. And it was part of the debate. They didn't just go and talk and learning. They would, taunt them. And therefore, this is to sharpen our minds. Or this is to make sure that we're ready and prepared. We don't get caught off guard. So people shouldn't mock us. Say, hey, you know what we're talking about. Interesting what Taisa's was Chuvas Havzdukim. I looked around, no one talks about it, but interesting that Tzedukim, it's clear that Taisa there, it wasn't just debating in learning. Okay, let's help up over here. And I'm not very good at this here.
Could it be that according to Rashi's Pshat, when Ravina and Rashi recorded the Gemara, they put everything down because people were forgetting the discussions from the yeshivas. Maybe they wanted to record also. This is Azoy Fleckman Zogn, Azoy Fleckman Redden in Beis Medrash. This is part of the recording.
Look at the riddles and you tell me if you still say that when we finish.
Okay.
Okay.
I forgot from last time we learned.
Yeah. Well, let's go through it. I'm not very good at these family. You need a picture to see, the family charts. But this woman says that that you are my brother. We share a common father, paternal brother, and not a maternal brother. And who baila the aim. But my brother is also the husband of my mother. And I am his wife's daughter. Who is this? How is that possible? Omar, the Gemara says, Omar. So what happened? Omar Rabbi Chama said, So this is what happened. That there's let's say Reuven was ma'anas a woman. Reuven and this girl were what do you call it? Reuven forced himself on a woman, and what do you call it? And he had what do you call it? Let's say a daughter, Rachel, and then what do you call it? Let's say Reuven's son. Then when so Reuven's son now, so Reuven has another son. So the son and that daughter Rachel are siblings, paternal, not maternal. Then Reuven's son goes ahead and marries the woman that was forced upon by his father. So now he and this girl are brother and sister. This girl's mother is also happens to be Reuven's wife. It's not Reuven's daughter. It's Reuven's wife's daughter. But it's not followed Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're not allowed to marry the woman that your father forced yourself upon. That's case number one. Okay, case number two. This is my brother, Ubriu, he's also my son. This boy over here is my brother, my son, and because he's my brother, I'm a sister. And because he's my son, I carry him on my shoulder. How can it be that her brother is her son? I mean, that's very simple. Interesting, the Gemara couldn't imagine that a Yid would have a relationship with his own daughter. So a guy who had relationship with his own daughter, so therefore her son is her brother because they have the same father. Next one. Shalom Bri says, Shalom to you, my son. Bas achasech ana. I am your sister's daughter. How's that possible? Same logic. Mishkach again, but it can't be a Yid. He would never do this. This is a goy who had a relation with his granddaughter. So we had a relation with his granddaughter, and what do you call it? And they had a boy. So this boy is what do you call it? This boy is the what do you call it? The son is the son of this woman, and also sister is also her, because they share the same father. It's also her sister's daughter. In other words, she's the mother of this girl, so it's the sister's daughter. Another one, the lav, the daloi, the dolu davla. Rashi says it means he's talking to the people who draw water, whatever that, the water carriers. Or Taisa says it's a euphemism for people who like to talk about riddles and enjoy the depths of wisdom. They're always trying to bring out, chokhmah. So he says here, Lipa b'chuseisa pasa. I want to throw at you some secret things, cryptic things. I want you to come out there and be able to tell me what it means. The hide darina, that this little baby that I'm carrying, who bar is my son, brot achu, and I am also his brother's daughter. I'm his mother, but I'm also his niece. How's that possible? Mishkach again. A guy that who had relations with his the daughter of his son, and had a son. So therefore, that boy is first of all. So therefore, she's the mother of that boy, and also because she's the granddaughter. The granddaughter is talking. She's the mother of that boy because it's her son, but she's also the daughter of the boy's brother because this is the grandfather. Then the next one, baya, they. Here's another case. Ma'ach, that ma'ach from my brother, who's my father. My brother is my father. Who Baal, he's also my husband. Who Bar, he's the son of my husband. And who Baila the aim, and he's my mother's husband. And Vano Bar to the Itzin, I'm the son of his wife, which is a bit repetitive. What's going on here? And terrible thing is, we're so related and so mixed up together. He doesn't give any bread to his B'yasmit, to his brothers or Yisaimim, B'nei Barte, his grandchildren, his daughter's children. What is going on here? Again, Mishkach is can't be by Yidden. Yidden don't do any such things. Talking about a goy, how Boalimai. The goy had relations with his mother, and Bas. So he had a daughter, which is his sister, right? Because they share the same mother. So he had a daughter, which is his sister, but it's also his daughter. And the Chazar Uba al Oisebas. Then this guy had relations with that daughter. So now her brother is a son-in-law, and therefore it becomes also. Sorry. So this daughter now, her husband, her brother, her daughter, her brother, her son, same person, is now her husband because this son, brother, is living with her. So now is the husband. And then the Chazazok, and then the Zayda Bola decides to have a relationship with her as well. The Ha'ilim had children. So therefore, so each one of them can say that it's either it's my grandfather who's my father and my mother's husband, and the brother can say, and to the brother he says, you're my husband, you're my brother, you're my son. Confusing. Another one is Anova at Achi, we're both you and I are brother and sister. Anova Avu Achi, I and your father are siblings. And Anova Imach Achi, I and your mother are siblings. How is that? Mishkach by Goy, Habo Alimai had relations with his mother. This guy had relations with his mother, and he had two daughters. So these two daughters are his sisters as well as his daughters. The Chazar Baal Achaz man, and he had relations with one of his sister's daughter and had a son. So this son now, what do you call it? And then Mekayele and now the Ima, so Ima, the aunt of this son, who happens to be the sister of his mother, the daughter of his father and her sister. They come to the Hach, he says that, because I'm your sister, I'm your father's sister, and I'm your mother's sister. Another, the last one, another at Bnei Achi, that you and I are Bnei Achi, we are the children of two brothers. Another Avuch, I and your father Bnei Achi are the children of two brothers. And another, I and your mother Bnei Achi are the children of two mothers. So the Gemara says that you don't have to say talking about a goy. You could be talking about it in a legitimate way, and therefore can be talking about Eden. You can talk about it in a legitimate way. You go in, for example, Reuven Reuven has two daughters, Va'asa Shimon, and Shimon, Reuven's brother, Shimon. Shimon came along, so there were three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. And Reuven had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Shimon married Leah. And also Bar Levi, and Levi's son went ahead and married Rachel. And also married Rachel. The son of Shimon is saying to Bar Levi, to the grandson of Levi. And they said those things there, that we are related, we share common two brothers, and two mothers who are sisters, and so on and so forth. Okay, now, going back to Rashi and Tesis. I guess Rashi, you could say people just talking about these things. Stop. I guess you go to these Mishnayos about Pefing, or Mr. Shabbos answer these riddles. But Tzdukim, difficult to understand why Tzdukim would bring this up, other than to mock the Rabbanan and get them confused so that they can have a debate and have leverage over them. What else can you learn? How else can you learn it?
According to Tosfos, who says it's the Tzdukim, so it's easy to understand why the Gemara keeps saying this is by a goy, this is by a nochri, because that's who's asking.
But Tzdukim are Yidden. They're Yidden. They just don't believe in Torah Shabbat Peh. So where does this come in? It's like throwing a spanner, getting them off guard, throwing them questions that they can't really answer. And once they're ready on the back foot, talk to them about Sfiras HaOmer, talk to them about anything else. And you sort of, you rile them up. That's basically what it is. You're riling them up. So would it appear.
Maybe it's just a break from all the complexities that we've gone through.
Let me just tell you, the Tzdukim had no time for the Pharisees. They were not friends. There was such an amase and acrimony between the two, if you read your history, that it's a nest that even had debates and learning. They were not friends. They had no genial conversations. Anyway, let's continue. Mishnah. Now, we learned before already, a Gershon is a guy, Konshiner, it looked a little bit like Rabbi Yechon disagreed with this concept, but we accepted unanimous that Gersh and his guy that two brothers technically are no longer brothers, or brother and sister technically can marry each other. It's only going to have a more that we don't want them to say you went from a chumrah to a kula. We don't want you to say, as a guy you couldn't marry a sister, now as a yid you can. So therefore we don't allow that. Another very important thing is that by goyim there's no such thing as paternal lineage, because we don't know who the father really is, only the mother. But also we say that if the mother conceived, while a goy, and they converted, so she gave birth to this child as a yid, that child is considered Jewish as far as the mother is concerned, but she still does not have a father, because the only relationship the father had with the mother is the time of conception. At the time of conception, they were goyim. So first of all, now that they converted, the father converted, he's no longer father, and but the mother converted before she gave birth. So therefore, she was already a yid when she gave birth. I guess part of the birth, and the father also, the Zera'ah, we don't know who the Zera'ah, we don't recognize the Zera'ah. So if the mother conceived while a goy and then gave birth while a yid, this kid has no father, but has a mother. So if he has another brother later on, they don't share a common father. So any of the laws that have to do with the father, they don't share. In other words, this child, the first child, won't yashin his father. It's not his father. The second child, who was conceived as a yid, born as a yid, a full-fledged yid, has a father. But on the other hand, they are still brothers, but they share a common mother, which will tell us regarding laws of yibum that if one of them dies, the other brother has no mitzvah yibum. In fact, it's forbidden. Now that he's a yid, forbidden to marry his brother's wife. But why? Because they share the same brother. So as far as the mother is concerned, they're brothers. As far as the father is concerned, when it comes to mitzvah yibum, they're not brothers. Okay, just bear that in mind. Says the Gemara, someone converted and children converted with her, the children have no mitzvah yibum whatsoever because they're not brothers. Afilu. Then he says that afilu, we'll discuss anymore what afilu is. Even if harasa shel rishon shel bigdusha, even if the conception was as a goy, the leidasa bigdusha, but was born as a yid, even though it was born as a yid, and the other one was a yid, so you might think that maybe they're considered siblings because maternally they are siblings. Nevertheless, the other brother was conceived and born as a yid. No, they're not brothers as far as the father is concerned. The same rule applies. The same rule applies to a maid who was freed with her children. Says the Gemara, B'nei Yudin Amsa, interesting name for a woman. So this is like Yudi. B'nei Yudin Amsa. There was this maid, Shifcha Kananis, whose name was Yudin. Ishtacher, she was set free. So she now became a full-fledged Yid. She converted properly. So Rabbi Yaakov allowed that her children, the children of this Yudan Amsa, her children, who were Gerim as well, he allowed them to marry each other's wives because he says they're not brothers, they're not siblings, not related. If you're not related and the other person died, why can't I marry that woman? We have no rules. It's not my brother's wife. We're not brothers. So he says there's no relationship whatsoever because Geshen is guy can control me. Amalei Rava says Rava to Rabbi Yaakov, but Rav Sheish is also Rav Sheish clearly says forbidden. Amalei, he said to him, so I'm sukratz. Who aser? Anashanina. He says it's forbidden, but I said permitted. Says the Gemara, minha of the lay mina aim. If let's say that they were brothers from the father and not from the mother, everyone, there's no argument, the shadi, that it's permitted because they don't really have a father. Mina aim, the mina of, let's say that they only have a common mother and different fathers as goyim. They have a common mother, even though they were all goyim, they converted together, but they have the same mother, not the same father. No, but if they only had the same father, not the same mother, then they all converted, there's nothing to talk about. Of course it's permitted. If they had the same mother and not the same father, is worse. And then it is forbidden. You know why? It's forbidden because people will see, then they grew up as Eden, people will see that they marry each other's wives and think, that if they're two brothers from the same mother, you're allowed to marry each other's wives. They'll think, maybe brothers of the same father, there's Yibum, whatever, but if the brother same mother, you're allowed to marry your brother's wife once your brother passes away. A mistake can arise. Ki pligi, when do they argue? Mina over mina, when they share both the same father and the same mother. And this is the argument. Man, the one who says that you're allowed to boss at Abba Shadin. People always say, they call him, this is Max's son or whatever. They always go after the father. So if nobody even knows about the mother, talks about the mother, they don't even know it's the same mother. All they know is that it's the same father. And therefore, a mistake is not going to rise and say, oh, you're allowed to marry your brothers. Everyone knows the mitzvah. No mistake will happen. The Bnei Planya Korilu, they all call him the son of that father. And therefore, nobody's going to think that they have the same mother. And they all know that they Gadim and Gadim don't have fathers. Why? Because we assume every Goyish woman is a Zaina, and she had many husbands. And therefore, who knows who the father is? And just because ostensibly people think it's the same father, everyone right away assumes, it was a guy when they were born. Definitely the same father. So nobody's going to make a mistake and say, oh, if we permitted that these two brothers to marry each other wives, that Bayini could do the same thing. Because different fathers, even though they say it's the same father, we don't believe it. But Rav Sheish is called Nami B'nai Plain. Rav Sheish says some people go after their mother's name. Oh, that's Esther's children or something like that. And therefore, people will know by a woman, they know it's the same mother because you carried it. And therefore, so brothers are allowed to marry each other. Maybe even also brothers are allowed to marry each other's wives once the brother died. That's a problem. That's one version. The others say, even brothers and mother, they argue whether you're allowed to marry each other. And why? The one who says it's forbidden is because people will make a mistake if he bayid. Well, my time, but what's the reason why it's permitted? Because Gershon is Gayer, a gay that converts is like a brand new born, they're not related. So there's no reason to make a Gzera. We don't make Gzeras, we're not related. Says, but okay, Tanan, in our mission, it says clearly Hagi Yedish and his Gairu, Benarima, a convert who children converted with her. There's no laws of chalitza, no longer they're not related. My timer, it sounds from the Mishnah you're not allowed to marry each other's. My time, it sounds in the Mishnah that there's no mitzvah, you're not allowed to marry each other. In other words, even though they're not related, because we're worried that people will make a mistake and think Bayid knows you can do the same thing. So we see L'chayr Rav Sheish is right. So Moshe says, Rabach says back away. Where's the Mishnah say forbidden? All the Mishnah says is there is no mitzvah, but if they want to, they can. Like the ain't of a They don't have the mitzvah because they're not related. And the Mishnah's Chiddush is trying to tell you is that these women don't have to wait for the brother-in-law because they're not related, and they can marry anybody they want. They can also marry their brother-in-law because they're not brothers-in-law. Because there's no mitzvah yibum, they're not related. So they can marry. The Chiddush of the Mishnah is that she's permitted to marry anybody she wants, including the brother-in-law, but anybody. And the Inu Namish are also permitted to each other. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah says Afilu. The Mishnah and a Chiddush, even if it was born as a Yid, one of them, and the other one was conceived and born as a Yid, still there's no mitzvah yibum. What's the even? If the Mishnah is trying to tell you that not only there's no mitzvah yibum, but they're not allowed to marry each other because there's some relation there, and nevertheless, that the Mishnah is trying to tell you that there is no relation of Yibum, but it's forbidden. Why it's forbidden? Because it's your brother's wife, and there's no mitzvah Yibum, but it's still your brother's wife. That's what it says. Afilu. Even if one of them was completely born Jewish, and the other one was only born but not conceived Jewish. So it's like they had two different mothers. Not like in the case where they're both born as goy, but they had like two different mothers. The first one was conceived as a goy. And then Vasheni and therefore the second one was conceived as a Yid. So the Chayda, this woman is two different people. The mother of this child is not the mother of this child because this is conceived as a Goy, conceived as a Yid. So you would have thought in this case definitely they're not related and there's no mitzvah yibum. So the Mishnah, no, they're still us. That's a big chiddush. It's us. I understand. That they're not related and totally mutter. My afilu. Then what's the afilu? The whole Chiddush should tell you that they're permitted to marry anybody they want, and there's no mitzvah yibum. What do you mean? I feel on the contrary. This is the Rapasha, like two different mothers. If they were both born as goyim, okay, they're very similar, and therefore, and the Chiddush of the Mishnah is there's no relation. They can marry anybody they want. But what's that filu? If one of them was conceived as a goy, one of them conceived as a yid, of course, there's no relation in that case there. So what's that filu? Simon says, I'll tell you what. The Avagad, the Tavai, Ledosa, Bedusha. No, that filu makes sense. Because even though one of them is conceived as a guy, but they were both born as Eden, and this is Mamish Eden, you would have thought, they're both born as Eden, they're Mamish related, and therefore they should be a mitzvah Yibam, maybe. Even though there's no mitzvah Yibam, but people will look at it, people will see they're both, this was born in the mother's Eden already, and they don't understand the nuances when they were conceived. So mistakes can arise. If we're going to allow them to marry each other's sister, then mistakes will arise. And the chiddush is, no, they're not related. She can marry anybody she wants, including her brother-in-law. So, in fact, Ikadam, another version, the other version of this discussion is, in fact, from the Mishnah Zaraya to that it's permitted. In fact, it makes sense. That is not only that there's no mitzvah Yibum, but they're permitted to marry anybody they want, including the brother-in-law. They're not related. The Sharitan the Mishnah feel even. That want that the Chiddush and Mishnah is she can marry, there's no relation, she can marry anybody she wants, including brother-in-law. Even though they were both born as Eden, so people can make a mistake. If we're going to allow her to marry anybody she wants, or even a brother-in-law, maybe Eden can do the same thing. They're both born as Eden. It's very possible, it's plausible that people will mix up between them and Eden. I feel like permitted. Okay. Tell me what they're not allowed to marry each other. Then what's the afilu? On the contrary, there's more grounds to say that they're not allowed, that they're so different from each other. This is born conceived as a goy, conceived as Yid. Then there's two different things. What do you mean afilu this? The afil gav the rishon it's also. So Gemara says no. What he's trying to say is that even though that Rav Sheish will defend himself and say that even though they look like two different mothers and therefore it should be permitted, nevertheless it is also to marry. So each one defends themselves and learns the mission the way they want to learn the mission. Saying what Tashma coming here. There were two brothers who were twins. The fact that they were twins, and not just fraternal twins, they looked alike, identical twins, gave him. So here in this case, not only everyone realizes they have the same mother, because we all know that, but they also realize they have the same father because they look identical. The Chay, and the Gemara Nida says that twins come from the father's chromosomes. The Chay, so therefore definitely we know that's the same father. Chay Meshachrar, the same case is by the case of Meshachrar. There's no chalitza, there's no yibum there. But why? Because they were gadim, and therefore they're not related. And even after they converted, they married, whatever it is, you're allowed to marry each other. Right? They're not related because geish is guy. You can't know them. Right? There's no familiar relations here. What about Hoysa, Hoyros, and Shaleb? You should conceive these twins as a goy, but they were born as a yid. Again, no chalitza, no yibum. Why? Because they're not related. They're chayiv if they marry each other's wife after the other one died. They're marrying their brother's wife. They were marrying their brother's wife. So it says clearly here that you're not allowed to. It's a proof to Rav Sheish, the question of Yaakov. They were conceived and born as a yid, even though originally the parents were goyim. There's no question. I think it's in the whole brain. The mamash yid. We learned, however. Ein chayavim b'shum eishes. It says in the first case, what is it? In the first case, where it says that they were gadim and then they became yidden, they're ein chayavim. They're not chayiv because of eishes ach. If they live with each other's wife, they're not chayiv. Mashma chiyuv aleka. There's no chiyuv, but it sounds like now. If they were both conceived without kedusha, but they're born with kedusha, we learned before you're not allowed to marry each other's wife because you have a common mother. And if you have a common mother, they're 100%. They're related to each other. Remember, if she was conceived and born as a yid, conceived as a goy, the fact is that the mother is the same. They are brothers. They're not allowed to. There's no father, no mitzvah yibum. But what about the first case? The first case is they were both born as goyim and then they all converted. They're not related to each other. And it says over there that if they marry each other's wife, there's no chiyuv. Sounds like there's no chiyuv, but they shouldn't do it. Isn't that a proof to Rav Sheish that there's still nisa here? Says Gemara, no. Rav Sheish will defend himself. Who adin that feeling nami leka? Rav Achbayak will say no. Not only there's no chiyuv, there's no Isser as well. They're chatchila allowed to marry two brothers who both converted. They're allowed to marry each other's wives if the other brother dies. So why does he use the word? There's no chiyuv. Say big chiddush. There's no Isser. You should say there's no Isser. Says Gemara, because I did the boy the safer, because in the next case where they were born as Jewish, it's forbidden. Abel Chayovin, and there we have to use the word Chayovin, that there's an Aveira here, because you both have a Yiddish mother and you're both born as Yidden from the mother. Is Parnami Reisha and Chayovin. From the Reisha also it says they're not Chayiv, use the same word, but really, not only not Chayiv, there's no Isser as well. Okay, we'll stop here, continue tomorrow.